one day during Holy Week. And I don't remember if the Holy Weeks that year between the East and West were lined up. But nevertheless, they did coordinate amongst many clergy, and that was simply the hierarchy. There were many clergy in different cities and so forth that were going to see this movie. It was a big deal. It was a huge, huge deal. Someone so high profile as Mel Gibson saying, I'm not going to direct another typical Hollywood fanfare movie. I'm going to do a movie about Jesus. And so it was received with great acclaim and box office. And after the movie's release, began the critiques of the movie and the reviews of the movie. And I recall at the time, our youth director at St. Demetrius in Seattle, who had been at the parish for a number of years at the time, had gone to see the movie. And I don't remember if he had taken a group of kids with him, but nevertheless, he had seen the movie, and it was the talk of the town. And I remember asking him, Lefteri, what did you think of that movie? He said, you know, it was extraordinarily well filmed, and, you know, it was very moving and very gut-wrenching. But, you know, it felt like they got to the part with the tomb, and it just ended. And I wanted to see more, he said. I wanted more. I wanted the rest of the story. I wanted to know what happens after he came out of the tomb. And I remember just a few short years later when we were discussing the movie at seminary, learning about the different Christian traditions, and again, we're generalizing here at the risk of disrespecting other denominations. But it was then, after a little bit more study, and I recall it kind of being typical of the tradition of the West, from going to Catholic school when I was a kid, knowing how the Roman Catholic Church perhaps emphasizes the passion of Christ, most of all during their tradition of Holy Week. And it began a bigger discussion in my mind, and in the minds of the students at the seminary, again a few years later, about how different Christian traditions emphasize different aspects of the Lord's ministry, the Lord's passion and resurrection. We see that in the West, in the, again, Roman Catholic tradition, there might be more of an emphasis on the crucifixion side. By the same token, there are other denominations that emphasize almost exclusively the resurrection side. We don't want to talk about the suffering so much because the Lord overcame that. And so there are even Christians, even families, for instance, who, when they have a loved one pass away, almost feel guilty to grieve that loved one because they feel they are less Christian if they grieve and not celebrate only. And again, we're talking extremes here, so that's not obviously everybody. You have one side that emphasizes the passion, the crucifixion, the death of Christ, and you have another extreme of the spectrum that emphasizes, that almost glosses over that and skips straight to the resurrection. In Orthodoxy, we know that there is no point in which the Lord is not resurrected, even tonight. Even today on our Holy Friday, on our Good Friday, as we've come to call it in the Western world. Even today, when we reenact and we relive his passion, his crucifixion, his taking down from the cross, and his burial in the tomb, we don't for a moment, amidst all of this, think that he is no longer in heaven and seated at the right hand of the Father theologically. We believe that Christ has already defeated death. Yes, but at the same time, in the Orthodox tradition, we also know that you do not have a resurrection unless there is a death first, unless there is a crucifixion. And so tonight, my brothers and sisters in the Lord, to those few of us gathered here physically, and those hundreds that may be watching online tonight, perhaps in our community, geographically, the country, in Greece perhaps, or other countries, who knows? perhaps more than any other service in the ecclesiastical year, perhaps, I'm not a liturgist, technically speaking, and I don't study the church calendar, perhaps as much as I should, but just posing a point tonight. Tonight, more than any other night, typifies what the Orthodox Church believes we are celebrating during this feast. Perhaps even during Holy Week, perhaps even during the church year. It is somehow a combination of both of those things. There is a term that we might find in Orthodox books and textbooks and writings of the saints. There's a term in Greek called harmonipi. There is not exactly a direct English translation of this, but the closest we come to perhaps is joyful sorrow. Joyful sorrow. There is this solemnness and a heaviness, of course. There is a weight to the services of tonight and last night. And even during the week when we hear about Judas's betrayal and the woman washing his feet and pouring oil on Jesus' head, and the entering to Jerusalem as the Pharisees are conspiring, and all of the terrible things that were done to Christ, to our Lord. While at the same time acknowledging that all those things took place, we also somehow acknowledge that there is something more to come. Something more that will be celebrated in its fullness tomorrow night. But we neither gloss over the passion, nor do we just focus on the passion. There is tonight a combination of both. And so neither do we, as one particular Catholic filmmaker said, just focus on all the things that led to the tomb. But neither do we say that grieving is not okay. Somehow there is both. And somehow we are transitioning from one into the other tonight. The incredible hymns of our church that we have been chanting all week long about the celebration of the Lord's climax of his ministry on earth that we celebrate this week, and all that has been done for us, for you and for me, is what we are celebrating tonight. We do grieve and have sorrow that the Lord did endure what he did on our behalf, but at the same time, in the hymns that we heard tonight, the angel we heard say, the time of sorrow, the time for weeping is no more. Go proclaim his resurrection to his apostles. It is a beautiful conundrum. It is an amazing paradox of our faith that the Lord did endure this, and yes, we are sad about it, but there is a victory that will be celebrated in its fullness. It is an amazing and beautiful victory. One which the world is still celebrating, and every human soul still finds resonating within us. May we remember all that he did for us, not arbitrarily, not for people 2,000 years ago, but for all of us today, all who lived back then, and all who are to come as well. It is a victory for all eternity. And it is what we celebrate tonight and tomorrow. May we remember this joy, even in difficult circumstances, like those that we find ourselves in tonight and the last month, but also every day of our life. Let this be a beacon of light always to each of us in our lives. Kali Anastasi, we look forward to praying both liturgies tomorrow for what has been coined Proti Anastasi και Δεύτερη Anastasi, kind of a misnomer, first resurrection and second resurrection. Let's call it the Vesperal Liturgy of St. Basil tomorrow morning, and of course the Divine Liturgy, the Paschal celebration tomorrow night at 11 p.m. God bless you. And once again, blessed resurrection.